hottest paranormal life show on YouTube, Into the Fringe, where we discuss lost civilizations, UFOs, cryptids, unsolved mysteries, megalithic structures, extraterrestrials, interdimensional portals, time skips, and more. Don't change that channel, because now you are leaving the mainstream and entering into the fringe. Well, greetings, Cardinal Sin Nation. It is I, Cardinal Sin, and thanks for tuning in to Into the Fringe, number 97. And today our guest is Mr. Walter Bosley, who has appeared as, who is an investigator of historical occult mysteries, author of pulp fiction novels, a screenwriter, and has appeared on History Channel's Ancient Aliens. After 20 years in national security, Walter Bosley runs his small press publishing company, Lost Continent Library, founded in 2002. Bosley has traveled much of the world and has been a publisher and author for 2 decades. Bosley spends his time writing fiction and nonfiction, as well as investigating strange mysteries. The latest news about Bosley's projects can be found at lostcontinentlibrary.com. Welcome back, my friend Walter Bosley, to Into the Fringe.
Hey, it's good to be here, Cardinal Sin.
It's good
my
to
friend.
see you, Walter Bosley.
Yeah.
Just get that little tag rolling there. Let's say hello to some folks in the chat that are here. The Bodhisattva Kid is here. Hey, sinners. Rui Congalves. Hello and greetings. Radioactive is in the house. Hail. Canadian Spider-Man is here. Even some channel members. John Guilfoyle is here. Hail all. Ari is here. Jonocide is here, and Jonocide says, "Hi, it's me, Jonocide." Russell Gill is here. Good evening. And I think that's about it for today. Now, one of the special things about today is that we are going to be discussing several topics, including Walter's book, The Esoteric Napoleon, which is a thrilling read for anybody, large or small. Not necessarily young, but small anyway.
Yes.
As people are rolling in, I just wanted to mention that our giveaway tonight is a Kaleidoscope Grimoire t-shirt. Thanks for the really cool giveaway, Walter. That's very generous of you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You know, it's the film, of course, that your listeners and viewers know well that I am in the middle of working on, and I'm real excited about this project. I'm very proud of what I've shot so far on it. I'm very proud of, and it will continue this year.
Very cool. Very cool. And folks, if you are a winner, please make sure to get in touch with me at gil@sunflower.com with your mailing address, and I'll pass it on to Walter so you can get your t-shirt. Remember, you must be in the chat to be eligible to win. At about an hour and 20 minutes, the mods will put the URL in the chat for you to follow to have your name put on the spinner wheel. Also, a few housekeeping notes. The Cardinal Sin Patreon page is up and running at patreon.com/gilbavel, and I've completed my YouTube channel memberships along with custom loyalty badges, so feel free to join. There are lots of different tiers with different incentives and cool rewards, so please check out both my Patreon and channel membership levels. Join the Cardinal Sin community and hang out with like-minded geeks and weirdos. Monetization has its privileges for both the content creator and members. And of course, next week we'll have fan favorite Albert Rosales back for his final appearance on the show and a giveaway of his book, UFOs Over Florida, autographed, of course. Now, I do want to get serious for just a second here. after I wet my whistle. According to my analytics, over half the people that watch my content aren't subscribed to this channel. Please subscribe. It makes a big difference. And as Canadian Spider-Man says, it's free. It costs you nothing. So please make sure that you're subscribed, or Canadian Spider-Man will beat me up. And you'll save a puppy. Okay, Walter, let's go ahead and do our Tiki pour-ups.
Let's
Tiki
do it.
versus Tiki. Let's see which one wins, or at least we can judge on cool points. So today I have Krampus.
Well, I'm honoring you by sporting one of these brand new Cardinal Sin mugs that I just received by your graciousness. And so I'm enjoying some hot tea in my Cardinal Sin mug. Take a look at that.
Understand.
Look at that. Look at that.
Yeah. And it's got a cool little logo on the other side.
Oh, yes. Well, this one has the website, the URL.
That's where we are now.
Yeah.
So I'll at least do my pour up.
I broke the rule. I should have had what I got to do. Yeah, I have to do a setup where I have the hot pot right here. So just imagine the hot pot is Guild pours. And I'll do a hot pot in the future.
And
a little Chinese
I'm enjoying
pot.
a little ginger beer this evening.
Oh, nice choice. Nice choice. Mine is what's called winter wake-up tea from Trader Joe's. It's a spicy, cinnamony delight.
We probably should have switched beverages tonight. I could use a little wake up. Yeah. That is tasty.
Indeed.
So again, the book that we're focusing on tonight is the Esoteric Napoleon, an immensely well-researched and provocative piece of literature. Yes. In this fourth installment of his Secret Mission series, Walter presents his hypothesis involving the legendary historical figure Napoleon Bonaparte. What was he searching for in Egypt? What happened to him inside the Great Pyramid, and why was he there? What was the secret of Napoleon's ancestry, and why was the European oligarchy so concerned? What was Napoleon's association with the mystery of Rennes-le-Château? These and many other questions are posed in this volume of Walter's unique examination of one of the greatest and purposefully mischaracterized men who ever lived, and we're going to get some answers to those tonight. Now, Walter, a few weeks ago, I was watching your YouTube channel, the Walter Bosley channel, and I was watching you and Dr. Joseph Patrick Farrell talking about the parts of your respective research that sort of have that Venn diagram overlap. And I had an epiphany all at once in my brain, which rarely happens to that shriveled organ. I could see everything. All the painstaking research you've done and written about, all the stuff Dr. Farrell has written about that I've read, Sesh Hari, etc. I could see it all. Joan of Arc, how the Templars were run off with their loot into the ships on the ocean, their journey and presence in North America, Oak Island, all of it, just shone like a grail-shaped beacon in my mind. And for about an hour, I couldn't get over how I finally saw all of it at once. It almost broke my mind, which was broken long ago. But seriously, the understanding that the Masons were once the Templars and the Templars became the Masons just blew my mind. Any thoughts on that before we get into the book?
Well, I've had lots of thoughts on that. That is a rather popular hypothesis and perspective on the history of the mysterious Knights Templar and Freemasonry and such. And you know, you're hitting the nail on the head with what you are divining or intuiting, as they say, about this. You're on the right track with that. I've written about the idea of the Templars in North America and their the possibility of their vaults of relics. From my perspective, they have moved the vault across the continent through the centuries, And I've hypothesized what I think was in these vaults. It's something that has a lot of, I think, inconvenient evidence to back it up.
And it's not just treasure chest full of pieces of 8.
Right. It would be certain historical relics, what they would consider, what we would call religious or some type of mystical relic. We're talking Ark of the Covenant, because there is an idea out there that's long been known that there was actually more than one ark. There's the original ark that's spoken of, and it might be that original one, but it doesn't have to be when you consider the ark might itself be some type of machine, right?
That's why that warehouse in Raiders of the Lost Ark is so long, because it's ark after ark after ark.
It must be, right? All these different arks. But the Templars, they are both discoverers of the heart of the mystery, and then they have become a part of the heart of this mystery of the true history of humankind, human civilization on this planet.
And do you believe that the Ark was a radio for communicating to God?
I think it's very possible. I refer you to Joseph Farrell and Scott DeHart's book, A Grid of the Gods, in which they lay out how Christian, specifically Roman Catholic cathedrals, could have been constructed on a forgotten system of just that, some type of advanced technological communication. And they study these sites where these cathedrals have been built. They study the shapes of them. They study the accoutrement of the altars, and they point out how these things mirror what really could be some type of telecommunications station. The Ark could also, just like Joseph Farrell's hypothesis and Christopher Dunn's hypothesis with the pyramid, as well as being a generator, for local energy application, it could also have been weaponized. And the Ark, of course, could have been weaponized. One of the other relics, speaking of weapons, that I have argued was among these in the Templar vault, which I suggest was moved across North America, was the sword of Joan of Arc. And that in itself shows evidence of being crafted with a knowledge of an advanced technology.
I'd like to hear more about that. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, as I've written more extensively in my first Secret Missions book, the one about Juan Cabrillo, the sword of Joan of Arc bears striking resemblance to, and has been connected to by a scholar named Michael Bernard, to the sword of Charlemagne. And when you dig into both the history of these swords, the lore surrounding them, the actual reports, the rumors surrounding these two swords, you come away with being reminded of Excalibur, of Arthurian legend. And
funny you mentioned that. I just watched that movie the day before yesterday.
Oh yeah, that is a masterpiece. That one's a classic that everyone should see. Well, the sword of Joan of Arc, in my opinion, is I think what there was Excalibur was a type of sword, okay, or what we could call it the Excalibur type of sword. But when you look at Arthurian legend and you read the description of the sword physically and its properties and the things it could do, you find the same thing in the story of Charlemagne at the Battle of Tours, and also how he came to have the sword, and then subsequent to that, the very special sword of Joan of Arc. He or she who wields it is invincible, won't be struck down in battle. The sword flashes and shines, at the sight of it, and on and so forth. It's all in my book, how I lay it out and connect it. And it's my opinion that sword is very likely one of the relics that was in the Templar vault, because Joan of Arc's story happened a century after the persecution of the Knights Templar of the Order. So by that time, the Order, its knights, they were undercover and functioning under the surface, which, clearly persecuting and outlawing that organization was a big mistake on the part of the church and the crown of France at that time. But I was able to trace that Joan's brothers were likely, if not Templars themselves, we're all talking in the post-persecution era, secret Templars, that they were associated with Templars. And you see, the sword disappeared after Joan was captured, and she was very famously imprisoned. And what's interesting is you can read the transcript of the interrogations and her trial. It's fascinating reading, okay? It's the actual transcript. And you come away realizing, wait a minute, they were obsessed with this sword. Mm-hmm. And the English, remember, she was leading France against England, and the English captured her, and they oversaw the trial, they were behind the scenes. They were the ones pushing the interrogators, to ask about the sword. They wanted to know where the sword was, how she got it, where was the sword, who has the sword. They were obsessed with this because, you see, when she was captured, the sword she had on was not the special sword, and they knew that immediately. She feigned ignorance. She goes, well, I gave, the sword and some other pieces of armor and things like that over to my brothers. I have no idea, where it's at. And what's interesting is you never hear of any follow-up of the brothers, which, again, to me, further speculates that, well, if they were suspected of being Templars, then they weren't going to mess with them, okay? They were going to try to squeeze it out of Joan. Who's got the sword? Where's the sword? And the sword has disappeared. It has never shown up again. So I base my speculative hypothesis on that her sword disappeared. There's very likely some Templar connection to her army, and very specifically possibly her brothers. And that by then the Templars had already established outposts here in North America, and it would have been very easy for the brothers to get that sword across the Atlantic to North America so they could hide it in the vault. Because at that time, the early 15th century, remember, this was before those who ran Europe in those days, the old world. This was before the games were being played and the decision was made by Spain to open up the New World, okay, to the masses. Mm-hmm. This was something that was very likely a well-kept secret among certain elites and merchants and on and so forth. Certain orders, like the Templars, the Teutonic Knights, whoever was involved in merchant trading, right? Who would have been the inheritors of the old Phoenician trade routes. They all knew about the New World, but the opening of the New World to the masses, as we know, didn't take place till the last decade of the 15th century. Now, Joan's story is much earlier than that. So these vaults, if they did exist, they were well hidden from Europe. They were well hidden from England, okay? So that's my hypothesis, is that the sword of Joan of Arc ended up over here in North America and vaulted by the Templars. It's really a fascinating story, this relic, when the king at Tours, it wasn't Charlemagne, it was Charles Martel, I'm sorry. Charles Martel, the name escaped me for a minute. When Charles Martel got the sword, it was literally the night before the legendary Battle of Tours, and he was outnumbered by the army coming from the east, right? I forget the Al-Hadif or something was his name. And it looked like a certain defeat for France, which would have been a defeat for Europe. And a meteor, according to the story, according to the witnesses and the sources, a meteor falls to the ground. Martel quickly gathers up his blacksmith and his weaponsmith, his sword maker, and they ride out. They haul in this meteorite, and the sword maker then fashions the sword, we are told, overnight. And then Martel shows up the next morning with this amazing, beautiful, flashing sword and inspires his army and leads them to victory, pushing the Eastern army back, out of France, and saving France and ostensibly all of Europe, we are told. The truth about the battle is that there were some very clever last-minute decisions made by the French. There were some tricks pulled that confused the army of, and I'm getting his name right, Al-Hadif, I think. Anyway, and they started to retreat. So it was just a big cluster, as we say.
Yeah.
And kind of by default, or just, kind of like a clown show, Charles Martel and the French forces end up winning that battle. Well, what he does afterwards, we're told, and much of this, the researcher Michael Bernard has reported. He goes and, in honor of God, according to the story, he goes to the church of, if I'm saying it right, Firebois. This is a church dedicated to St. Catherine of Alexandria. Excuse me, I got to hit the... Sorry about that, the cough button. And he buries the sword behind the altar of the church at Firebois, dedicated to St. Catherine of Alexandria. Now, if you followed my research, you know that I presented the fact, backed up by the modern Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican scholars, there was never any such thing as a real biographical living St. Catherine of Alexandria. What that was the syncretic revision of the goddess Hecate.
Can you explain for us what syncretic means?
Oh, it's when the church puts a veneer of Christianity or Catholicism over the personality, image, attributes of an ancient god, so that they don't have to struggle with the locals still wanting to venerate their ancient god or goddess. They can just put a Catholic label over it and be happy.
It makes it easier for them to
take over the world,
to bring in the pagans.
Yeah, to bring the pagans into the church and all that. And that's all. There was no St. Catherine of Alexandria. What she was a syncretic revision of Hypatia of Alexandria, who was very much a historical woman, and attributes of the goddess Hecate. So St. Catherine of Alexandria is the goddess Hecate. Now, here's where that gets even more interesting. So there's Charles Martel bearing the sword, we are told, behind the altar in a church dedicated essentially to Hecate. Then, decades, eras, centuries later, Joan of Arc comes along, and she has a vision of 3 saints, the main who come to her and communicate to her starting at a young age. And the main one leading the show on this is St. Catherine of Alexandria, also known as Hecate. So, Joan of Arc was being led and guided, according to her own testimony, by the goddess Hecate. Only she knew her as St. Catherine of Alexandria. So Hecate essentially appears to Joan this one time and tells her, go dig behind the altar. of the church at Firebois, and you will find a sword. Clean this sword off and carry it into battle. So she goes, she finds the sword of Charles Martel. It's cleaned up, and that's the special sword. That, according to the research of Michael Bernard and other historical sources, that's the story of how she gets the sword. Essentially, she's led to it by this goddess figure, okay? Now, here's what becomes even more interesting and ties it into Arthurian legend. If you recall, Arthur, through Merlin, gets the sword through the Lady of the Lake, a female entity who, when you look at her, again, this is another Hecate figure, number one. So essentially, Hecate is the one who brings Excalibur to Arthur through Merlin. Now, through Arthurian legend, we know Excalibur as the sword in the stone. Well, we also know that, obviously, through Charles Martel, because the story is a meteorite fell, and from this meteorite was fashioned this special sword. What is a meteorite but a rock? A stone. So the sword in the stone. Okay? I would say the Martel version is more...
Or in this case, the stone and the sword.
No, the sword from the stone. Because it's fashioned from that stone.
The stone is literally in the sword.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Embedded within the sword. Yeah. So really, the legend, the Arthurian legend about the sword being stuck in the stone and he draws it, so that's all metaphor. In my opinion, that's metaphor for what Martel reported, is that we're talking a meteorite, which these things have fallen throughout history. The Excalibur of Arthurian legend itself was also fashioned from a meteorite. Okay, plus there were some other elements mixed in, which I get into in the Cabrillo book with the Joan of Arc stuff. So Martel, we're told that he gets the sword, after praying to God, and it falls out of the sky in this meteorite. But there's nothing in the story that tells us why he took it to the Church of Firebois. There's our connection to the Lady of the Lake / Hecate. Okay. And then, of course, we have Joan led to the sword by this female entity. So you see, it's obvious, the thread there. It's all connected to the same version, the same claim as in the Arthurian legend. And so I argue that Hecate has been guiding certain individuals to this particular sword technology. And I'll take it one step further. This is another reason why I suspect that Hecate is one of the Tuatha De Danann, because the Tuatha De Danann in their lore, which is a whole other discussion, they came to this world and they helped bring civilizations up. It's very similar to the Quetzalcoatl or the Viracocha stories, right?
Sure.
And one of the things or even the fallen angels, the churchianity people might suggest,
which were all drawn on previous
right,
false
and Hecate and specifically in the Tuatha De Danann, all they essentially predate all of that stuff, that churchianity lore and things like that. But weapons, okay, and the art of war was one of the things that people were taught by these advanced beings. And I argue that Hecate, as the Tuatha De Danann, was part of that, and these are examples of part of that. And the reason the English, obviously, were obsessed with the sword is because their lore tells them that at one time it was their guy who had the sword, right? Mm-hmm. And they want it back. My view is they see it as part of their history. They want it back, and that's why they were so keen on capturing Joan and pushing the interrogation and the trial in the direction that they did. It's all really fascinating stuff. And I always find more threads and more things that pop up that just keep refining the possibility.
So Radioactive has made a $5 super chat, which I appreciate. And I'm going to ask you the question, then I'm going to play the thanks for your support video. And by the time we get back, you will hopefully have an answer for us. And he says, so do you think these people had access to a map like the Piri Reis map and used it to hide this sword. And so we will go ahead and dedicate this to Radioactive.
Hello, I'm Kathleen Martin, and you are watching Into the Fringe.
All right. Always good to see Kathleen.
Yeah.
So, what do you think is...
the short answer is yes, because this is exactly the kind of thing that the orders... this is after the persecution of the Templars, remember, or not long before, I should say, within 100 years before the Fourth Crusade. Okay, the infamous Fourth Crusade that was supposed to go into the Holy Land and decided to stop at Constantinople. Now, what's interesting is the Templars would not participate as soldiers in the Fourth Crusade attack on Constantinople, but the other associated knightly orders did. And one of the places they sacked was the library, museum, reliquary of Constantinople, which was their version of the Library of Alexandria, kind of a national archives, if you will. And after that was, I believe, you saw the real beginnings of the Renaissance. You saw the move towards the opening of the New World. You just saw certain things in history that can't be explained any better than getting their hands on ancient maps to the New World, right? And so, yes, the answer to that question is yes, they absolutely had. They were called portolans. Mm-hmm. And, there were some organizations of people that had these things before the Fourth Crusade and the sacking of Constantinople, but that event opened it up to more players. So, yes, I would argue that, absolutely maps to and of the New World, even older than the Piri Reis.
And it occurs to me that probably before we go too much further, we should acknowledge the unhappy fact that Raquel Welch has passed on.
Yes, indeed. 82 years old. She was an icon to, the males of our generation, that's for sure. From what is it? Fantastic Voyage to 1 Million Years BC to Kansas City Bomber, 100 Rifles.
I haven't ever heard of Kansas City Bomber.
Oh, that was her, I believe it was 1972 is when it came out, and she played a roller derby. She was on a roller derby team.
Cool.
You might not have remembered, but back in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, I remember this on TV regularly on the real low-end local channels like Channel 11 or 13, maybe Channel 9, KHJ, TV 9, that you hear in the Quentin Tarantino movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But I think it was Channel 9. The Thunderbirds were the roller derby team in LA, and this was wild. It was the non-science fiction version of roller ball, of course, and you think minor league hockey's rough and tumble. Roller derby was hilariously rough and tumble. And they made this movie during that trend of cinema verite, low budget stuff. And Raquel Welch played, I believe, number 11 on a roller derby team, Kansas City Bomber. And so, she had a career that lasted over 50 years. I'm proud to say that she's a fellow Aztec, a fellow graduate of San Diego State, just as I am. Woo-hoo. And, she was... and actually a very funny, cool person too, and was acting up until just, a few years ago. So yes, we have to say farewell to Raquel.
Pour one out for old Raquel.
RE saw it. There's RE says, I saw Kansas City Bomber in the theater. First run. There you go.
Yeah. And Tessa D777 says, roller derby was as fake as wrestling.
Exactly, Tessa. Yeah, you remember. You remember how cheesy it was. I mean, it was, it was just good, awful fun.
I don't know why that hasn't. I mean, it's still going on today. Sure. I have a friend who was a referee for roller derby. You would think that would be immensely popular. Oh, I forgot. We're in the current year. So you can't have any strong women, bearing cleavage and that sort of thing.
That's right. Sex appeal is not allowed in this Puritan society in which we.
And the Bodhisattva kid says it's definitely not fake anymore.
Well, you know what? There might be some truth to that. It might be a mix, a blend, But yeah, I think they should bring it back.
Yeah, I think that would be, especially a pay-per-view environment. That way the wokesters don't have to watch it, and they can't complain about it.
Yeah, because there's still like a bikini football league, isn't there?
I don't know, but Ari says, yeah, we've got the first track derby in KC. Great stuff.
Flat track derby.
Yeah. Cool. Kansas City is a first in many things having to do with sports and sporting.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing we lack is an NBA team. And I'm hoping that'll get rectified. Because
who won? I heard there was a game, some sports game on Sunday. Who won that thing?
I don't pay attention to American football, so I don't know. I was looking for something to do. I went on YouTube and nobody was streaming, and that never happens, right?
Well, I've learned my lesson. I've tried to on a couple of Super Bowl Sundays, and there's enough people, even if they don't want to admit it, that they're just not going to. And my guest, as it turned out, Martin, was glad. He's a bit of a football fan, so he was glad that I changed it to Monday. So, and hey, I want to bring up this is an interesting segue. In the interview with Martin about the Blue Oyster Cult Imaginos stuff that's fascinating, there was a synchronicity to Esoteric Napoleon.
Oh, really?
Yes, indeed. You see, I think the first name's Albert Bouchard, was a band member, is one of the famous band members of the Blue Oyster Cult. And he's important in Martin's research because he was the one who carried the torch and pursued the interesting Imaginos storyline mythology from Sandy Pearlman, their manager, who envisioned it. And I mentioned during the interview with Martin that, isn't that interesting that, there's this kind of occultic, mystical quality to what we're talking about with Blue Oyster Cult and all this stuff. And he has the same last name as Angelique on Dark Shadows, So my mind goes to, I wonder if there's something in perhaps voodoo history, or because remember, Angelique meets Barnabas in the West Indies, as they called them back then, and she learns from
all 1,200 episodes.
That's right. That's right. And she learns what she learns magic-wise from the local voodoo culture and stuff. So, but here's an interesting thing. It had slipped my mind during the discussion with Martin that the French officer credited with discovering the Rosetta Stone was Jean Bouchard, same spelling. And when you consider what, and I agree with Joseph Farrell on this, the very strong likelihood that the Rosetta Stone was planted. It's interesting that, because I do think Bouchard would have been selected to be the credited discoverer of the stone. I just thought that was interesting, a nice little touch.
And while we're mentioning the Rosetta Stone, I understand you have some ideas about how it got there.
Well, yeah, it's there are those. Let's see. Let me paraphrase a very popular show. Let's see. Rosetta Stone scholars suggest or believe.
Yes. Rosetta Stone theorists.
I came away from my Napoleon research convinced that the Rosetta Stone had been decoded, translated before it ever left Egypt. Okay, before it ever, what I mean is before it ever left Egypt to return to France to subsequently be, captured by the English. And I think that Napoleon and his savants, these scientists, archaeologist types that went down there with him in the first place, already knew how to translate and how to read these things, because the Rosetta Stone had been found and translated prior to this expedition. Here's what's interesting. Excuse me, let me take a sip. I'm having dry throat. I apologize.
Well, you and me both, man. I've got allergies that every time the weather changes here in Kansas and there's snow on the ground, it's bitterly cold outside. Every time the weather changes, my allergies go off.
Well, the officer who happens to be with Bouchard when he allegedly just trips on the Rosetta Stone. He just trips on it, we're told. The officer with him is Colonel de Hautpoul. Now, that name, de Hautpoul. Turns out he is, a cousin, but a direct blood relative to Madame de Hautpoul. And those of you familiar with your Rennes-le-Château lore will know who Madame de Hautpoul was. She was the one whose gravestone has pointers to the mystery of Rennes-le-Château. And some have pointed out to the Rosetta Stone also. Now, the fact that Colonel de Hautpoul, who did interact with his family back in France and would go, would attend the interesting, not officially secret, but, not open family meetings in the south of France, he happens to be with Jean Bouchard when this is found. Well, the suspicion and the argument is that he oversaw the planted discovery, as Joseph Farrell puts it, that the Rosetta Stone discovery, basically it was salted, so to speak. In other words, it was planted, the whole thing was planned, it was time for whatever reason. But you have to ask, for how long did the de Hautpoul family have possession of the Rosetta Stone, or at least their associates? What did the study of this and the ability to read the ancient texts, the ancient papyruses, what did this tell the savants who in turn influenced Napoleon Bonaparte? Now, here's what we know about the biography of Napoleon Bonaparte. During the Italian campaign, an 1,100-year-old papyrus scroll was discovered, and it was of keen interest to Monge. Monge was he was a famous mathematician, French scientist, philosopher scientist, and he was the one scientist who was the closest confidant to Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, we're told that Monge is part of the team that discovers this papyrus, and it's in his hands. So do some math here. If Monge has access to the translation of the Rosetta Stone, he can read this papyrus and any others that we weren't told about. There's every reason to believe that Monge and many of these other savants, as they're called, these philosophers, scientists, archaeologists types, mathematicians, were Freemasons. Now, we know that the Freemasons, in France in particular, but elsewhere, loved Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, nowhere do we find that Napoleon joined a lodge, but he was, even though he wasn't a member, he was essentially a friendly, okay? And they loved the guy. They offered many times. They considered him a Freemason in spirit. So when you bring in Freemasonry, you bring in the de Hopewolves, and via the whole Rennes-le-Chateau mystery and such as evidence of a connection there. There's no doubt that Monge and de Hopewol knew each other. So it's looking like Monge and the other philosopher scientists whom Napoleon greatly respected and who went on this expedition to Egypt, they knew where to look for things. They knew what to look for. They could read everything they needed to read once they got down there. Napoleon's expedition to Egypt, as I argue in the book, and I have on many discussions before, this was not to feed his ego. This was not to conquer Egypt. A lot of that British propaganda is because he had the British panties in such a bunch that, they had to make this guy out into a monster to make it look like they were going after, a big foe. It was all self-aggrandizement when really they were just jealous as hell because this guy was beating them at their own hegemony game, okay? And they were just they were just jealous. They were afraid that this French upstart guy, who really was Italian-born, he wasn't French-born, was going to beat them at their own game. They wanted to be, the big empire. They wanted to be, the big rulers over everything. And so, they had their essentially pissing contest with Napoleon, and they were losing. And so, they spread all the rumors about why Napoleon really went, when actually the facts point to the directorate, the government at the time, saw, particularly Maurice de Talleyrand, okay, they saw where Napoleon, he was growing in popularity, and he could be a threat to their internal own political power. So Talleyrand got the French government to agree. There had been multiple over the years. There had been multiple proposals for France to invade Egypt, but they were all turned down. Talleyrand convinced the French government to back Napoleon's expedition because it would get him out of the way. They thought, he'd be out of France, he'll be out of the way, maybe he'll die down there. And they tried to see to that happening because there were assassination attempts on him down there. So he goes to Egypt because primarily he's fascinated with the lost, history of our world and the lost civilizations and forgotten technologies and stuff. Napoleon, when you read about the man, you find out that, as much as he was a genius for warfare, and for that kind of thing, and as much of a genius as he was for civic-minded things and municipal science, as it were, his first love was science and ancient history and archaeology. Okay, he would have much rather have been, an Indiana Jones or a David Childress or a Richard Leakey or that's what that was his first love. And so going to Egypt was just as much, if not more, about that kind of thing. So, you put all these things together, and what you've got is a secret mission, as I titled the series of these books. The Esoteric Napoleon is number 4 in the Secret Mission series. He was looking for something. And that's part of, why I'm digging into his research, because there's possibilities of what he was looking for that, some will be obvious, some might not be so much. I'm still digging into this stuff, but there's a lot of reasons to suspect that the Rosetta Stone was planted, that the standard historical account we're told is not how it really happened, not how it went down. So it just really, it all depends on the individual and, how far you're willing to go off of the mainstream traditional history path, but I've gone way off that path. So,
well, yeah, I mean, because generally speaking, we know that mainstream historical stuff is largely bullshit.
yeah, turns out to be, very often it's, he who wins the big conflict writes the history, right? And, it's just the way things go. And I'm glad to see that historians started emerging really about 40 to 50 years ago. These voices started getting a little louder that, hey, this traditional nonsense we're taught about Napoleon is nonsense. He was not the horrible, antichrist despot that British propaganda has made him out to be, and Anglophile historian types have embraced. And always I get the guys who pipe up with, what about the Russian campaign? A lot of soldiers were... Well, I'll tell you what, a lot of the deaths in the Russian campaign were because of how the Russians responded. That, they would burn their own cities. They would, it was just as much of
policy.
Yeah, it was just as much their scorched earth policy as, they figured, what, he's coming. Well, we're going to make sure he finds nothing but cinders and rubble. And on top of that, yes, his form of warfare that had been tremendously successful was based on the fact that he could move fast. Nobody, in modern, in European history, had ever moved their armies as fast as Napoleon could. How did he do that? Well, he would take what he captured and use that to, okay, now I'll feed my soldiers, now I'll house them, now I'll clothe them. And it was the idea of using the resources as you capture them. It's very similar to, what I was taught in my training for what I did in the military. I was taught, don't walk around with, 20 magazines of ammo on you. You only need a few because you're going to take the magazine off the guy you put down. You take his ammo. Okay, that's how I was taught. So it was a very, in a very general way. It was a very similar thing. So what that meant is that Napoleon, he made a big miscalculation. He wasn't prepared for the harsh winters. Okay, that the Russians are used to. I mean, for them, they holiday on the ice,
been
right?
The saving grace of Russia for 2,000 years. It's not so much that the Russians defeated their enemies as the Russian winter.
Right, yeah, and that happened to Napoleon, and he would admit. Here's the thing I tell people before you pop off, okay, about what you heard in history class or what you saw in some documentary whipped up, or what you saw in a movie that's 50 years old, or
Right.
what have you. Actually read as much as I and others have read. Go look at the truth about Napoleon. Was he a perfect messiah? No, he wasn't. But he was neither this evil demon death. This idea that, I hear this all the time. Walter, what about Nostradamus? And, Nostradamus saw Napoleon, and he prophesied him as the first Antichrist. No, he didn't. The guy who started all that nonsense was what a surprise, a British author who had written his Nostradamus book in the early 20th century or something. And he admitted subsequently that he used a terrible, awful French translation of the French. And he admitted that he just had to make stuff up and that it was terribly inaccurate. But people to this day, because, they go on they listen to some radio show and, some guy on there is saying, yeah, Napoleon was the Antichrist, some so-called Nostradamus scholar. And yet all these modern Nostradamus scholars are basing it on a very poor translation done by a guy in the early 20th century. And no, Nostradamus did not predict Napoleon, certainly didn't identify, any Napoleonic figure Napoleon Bonaparte is what I meant as an antichrist. It's just all made up. What that was a product of, by then, about a century of British propaganda. So that's pretty much the story with Napoleon. When you give it an honest look, is you find out the truth and you learn what he was really about, what he was really interested in, and you see a story there that we're never told. And that's what fascinates me about Napoleon Bonaparte and why I'm continuing to write about him.
And Walter, what can you tell us about Napoleon's brother and the alleged switch that was made? Was it Charles Bonaparte?
No, Charles Bonaparte was an American born in Baltimore who was a great nephew of Napoleon, but it was Joseph. Joseph Bonaparte was Napoleon's older brother. Now, he and Joseph were real close, and Joseph was just a couple of years or so older than him. And remember, they were born in Italy. They're Italian born.
Corsican?
Yes, yeah. And it is documented fact, okay, historically documented fact, because witnesses who were there wrote about this. After Waterloo, when the Bonapartes gave up Malmaison, their estate, and they headed to the coast. They were in Rochefort. I think Rochefort, I got the book here, but Rochefort is where they were. And Joseph begged Napoleon to switch places with him. You see, Joseph and Napoleon resembled each other much more than any of their other siblings looked like them. In fact, I go into the book with questioning whether the father, who was also named Charles, but I think of him as Carlo Bonaparte, the father of Napoleon and Joseph, I question whether he was their father, and I go into that in the book. Joseph, during Napoleon's life, would double for him, particularly when there were assassins trying to get at him. This is a fact. They used Joseph a couple of times to ride out in Napoleon's carriage to fool anybody that was looking to ambush him. So we get down to Rochefort when they know the British are on their way and they're not going to escape the Brits. And Joseph practically begs Napoleon. He says, look, they won't know the difference. And remember, this is in the days right before photography emerged. They won't know the difference. They're probably just going to, planning to imprison you in a nice, comfortable estate in the north of England. Ha ha, we know that didn't happen. So I'll gladly switch places with you and just go because, as we are told, there was a U.S. naval frigate off the coast of Rochefort. And they were sending a launch, a little boat, rowboat, but a launch with 2 U.S. naval officers out to pick Napoleon up. He could get on that boat, be on that American frigate, and be off to the United States before the British arrived or even knew what was going on. Now, we have evidence that this was already a concern because the British sent a couple of their naval warships to the United States to keep an eye on New York Harbor and Boston Harbor, okay? Because they suspected that Napoleon might flee to the United States. Now, here's what's interesting. As I talk about in the book, we are told that Napoleon just suddenly decided, no, the English will be good to me. They'll treat me, like a gentleman, and I'll be fed well, and I'll be, housed up in a nice estate in the north of England. Captivity in England will be wonderful. What neither one of them knew was that the decision had been made secretly to go directly from Rochefort after picking him up and taking him right to St. Helena, okay, that rock off the coast of North Africa. They didn't know that. But we're told that Napoleon was going to trust the English, and the rest is history. They came, they got him, they took him to St. Helena, and where he died, blah, 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 so forth. However, the circumstances and the rest of the details suggest otherwise. For instance, we are told that Joseph Bonaparte certainly did come to the United States. He lived in near Philadelphia, and he lived in New Jersey for a while. Meanwhile, the British assigned interviewer historian who was assigned to interview the Bonaparte captive, as I refer to him, who, ostensibly is supposed to be Napoleon, after weeks and months, of interviewing the Bonaparte captive, he even reported to his superiors, the English superiors. He said, "You know what? That's not Napoleon. That's Joseph." He said, I have a strong suspicion that we got the wrong guy here." So even he suspected it. And then there was the day that Joseph is walking down the street. I think he was on a visit in Washington, D.C. Maybe it was Philadelphia, I think, actually. And one of the Bonapartist bodyguards, and a military officer or member who had been a personal bodyguard of Napoleon, when he passes, who we are told is Joseph, on the street, he just immediately stopped in his tracks, and other people heard him refer to Joseph as Mon Emperor. And Joseph said, "Oh, no, it is I, Joseph. You've got me mistaken." And the guy just was like, "No, I'm not buying it. You are the emperor," and it was basically, hushed up. So we have, these things and all sorts of other stuff, little things that are in the book that really argue for Napoleon switching places with his brother Joseph. And because, as I alluded to earlier, these historians that are beginning to, have started to try and tell the true story of Napoleon Bonaparte going back 40 and 50 years, and in recent decades, we have Andrew Roberts. I strongly recommend you all, if you're interested in a different view on Napoleon Bonaparte, check out Andrew Roberts, who has written 2 colossal books, the biggest one being Napoleon the Great. And he's a British historian, and boy, his colleagues just can't stand his position on Napoleon. It just twists their BVDs. They cannot stand it. And of course, you've got your typical American, Northeastern elitist Anglophile historian, academia type who, he thinks it's all nonsense, of course, too. We all know Napoleon was the bad guy, So in more and more in recent years, we're getting a rehabilitated, more proper, more true, accurate view of Napoleon begin to emerge, which I'm still keeping my fingers crossed that the Ridley Scott film is more fair to him. But what I've heard about it so far is, in my opinion, for me, a huge disappointment when I hear that the heart of the film, the main thread of the film, is Napoleon Bonaparte's relationship with his wife, Josephine. Mm-hmm. That's a snooze fest. When you look at all the fascinating things about this man's life. You don't watch a Napoleon
film for a rom-com.
It's like, oh my God, if this movie just ends up being all about, his relationship with Josephine, I'm just, my God, I'm going to be tempted to walk out. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that Ridley Scott's holding back on some really cool, a different handling of Napoleon Bonaparte. So, it's too bad that if there's one guy who would have done an esoteric Napoleon type movie, it was Stanley Kubrick. We know the screenplay was done, we know that he was looking for the money. We are told, and I don't buy this entirely, but you know how I am, we are told that the reason he just drops his Napoleon movie was because of the 1970 Rod Steiger film Waterloo. Mm-hmm. I'm not buying that. I think he got resistance at that time because remember, he lived in England. He produced everything in England. I think from Kubrick we were going to get this honest, fair presentation treatment of Napoleon, and I think that the British powers that be, who control the purse strings of his money, his movie money. I think they kind of let it be known to him, you won't produce it here. We'll see to that. And so we're told that that's why he did Barry Lyndon instead. So here's what you got to imagine. It is very likely that the technical expertise and the style of Barry Lyndon is exactly how he would have filmed his Napoleon film. So imagine the Esoteric Napoleon dramatized. It would have looked and felt like Barry Lyndon, which is a masterpiece in visuals and such. So anyway, the movie we didn't get. Hopefully Ridley Scott will go the right direction with this.
And Ari mentions Love and Death, the best Napoleon film ever. I'm unfamiliar with Love and
That's
Death.
Woody Allen, isn't it? Napoleon Dynamite. There you go.
I haven't heard of Love and Death, and I'm a huge Woody Allen nut. So.
Maybe I'm getting it mixed up with. I remember the title. I have to admit, I have not seen that one. It's one of those movies I've heard of for most of my life, but I haven't seen.
And speaking of Ari, he and I went down to Dallas to check out the assassination locale, and I found it very interesting that the only thing other than a little X in the street that denoted where the car was when he was shot, that had anything to do with anything, was a little plaque that said something like an event of important historical value to the United States happened here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went on a tour of the 6th floor museum, which is where the book depository was, of course.
Right.
And they still have the sniper's nest all set up there.
Of course.
And everything. And
got to reinforce the mythology. I'm surprised that you didn't. So you chose not to take Jimmy Buffett's advice. Remember, Jimmy Buffett saying, if you ever get the chance to go to Dallas, take it from me, pass it by.
Yeah, no. But that was the main reason for our visit, actually. But we also, while we were there, there's a photo of me somewhere. I can't find it, but there's a photo that he took of me in front of I believe it's the national headquarters of the Freemasons, either the Scottish Rite or the Blue Lodge or both. And it's a huge building. And I wanted to share with you some images of the Lawrence Masonic Temple, which is no longer a thing, really, but it's a huge, almost block-long building. And when I was in Demolay, I was on the inside and got to see what it looked like, of course. Being Jewish, they made me the chapter chaplain.
There you go.
Figure. I don't know. But there's some also really other cool shots of the Masonic Temple here. Let me see if I can find it. This is a good one.
Yeah, nice.
It's just a huge, beautiful building. And interestingly enough, there's also a Negro Masonic temple in Lawrence, which being the Free State, I guess they had...
I think that's called, is it Prince Hall? Do they refer to it as Prince Hall?
I haven't ever heard it referred to that way. And then here's another look at it from I think an artist's perspective, or it looks very much to me like someone took a photograph of it and then did something to it in Photoshop. But you can see the old timey gas lamp
Oh, well, what you're looking at is probably a period postcard image, because with the font up there and the way the colorization is done, yeah, that looks like literally an old postcard.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
I kind of like
And
that.
it was built in 1910,
Mm-hmm.
so they would have had electricity by then anyway.
Sure, sure.
And I didn't know that Jonocide has family in Lawrence. Very interesting.
I used to pay my student loan to Lawrence.
Sally Mae was here
Sally Mae.
famously. Yeah, which
Yeah.
was a horrible, horrible thing to do to kids that just wanted to, kickstart their career and get an education, making them pay for it for the rest of their lives. I'm not a big fan of that.
Yeah, well, we definitely got to do something about the cost of a professional education.
And Tessa D777 says, yes, it is Prince Hall.
It is Prince Hall. Freemasonry is traditionally the African American Freemasonry.
Where he says, I have family in Lawrence too. Wah, wah.
I was
North
just
Cynthia's
rewatching.
here.
I was just rewatching the first episode of Supernatural that kicks off in Lawrence, of course, according to the show.
Oh, yeah, I think I heard that. And interestingly, Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles, which is the best Terminator of anything out there, period, except maybe the first movie. They've had to move because Sarah Connor is obviously really paranoid about them finding her and John. And this is when it was played by Lena Headey. And unfortunately, it was up against 3 other shows that shared the exact same audience. So they all got canceled. But this went for 2 seasons, and she's basically doing a quiz on John to make sure that he's remembered all the details of the legend that she's put together for them. And he's in some school in LA, and he's supposed to tell everyone that they're from Lawrence, Kansas. So I thought that was interesting.
Now, Lena Headey, she played Cersei in Game of Thrones.
She did.
Yes, she did.
And she was also famously in the Judge Dredd movie. The really horrible one. That's up for debate, I suppose. I was a sucker for the original
Stallone.
Judge Dredd with Sylvester Stallone and my favorite bad guy actor. I can never remember his name. And in the movie, they were brothers, which is not the source material at all. But I really liked the 50-year-old war robots and stuff like that. It had a much more 2000 AD feeling to it than the new one did, I thought.
Isn't it? Here's you talk about characters ending up being brothers. Usually, satire follows drama, right? Usually. Isn't it interesting that Austin Powers in the early 2000s had, turns out that Dr. Evil, the Blofeld character, turns out to be Austin Powers' brother. And then the Daniel Craig Bond films, the serious Bond films, essentially do the same thing with Blofeld turning out to be his brother. I'm wondering, were they actually inspired by Austin Powers?
Wouldn't that be cool?
I thought that was an interesting turn of events there. With that.
Absolutely. Just checking with the chat to see if they're following along or if they're doing their own thing in the chat.
they figure, it's that Bosley guy again.
Oh, and Darth Scipio mentions that Lena was hot in 300, the movie.
Oh, that's right. She was in 300 also. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Well, it looks like we've kind of come full circle. We started off by, honoring Raquel Welch, and now we come to Lena Headey.
Yeah. Hotties both, let's face it. So for those of us that may not be as well versed in the Esoteric Napoleon, is there anything that stands out to you in the book that we haven't covered that you think is important to cover?
Well,
because I mean, there's so much book here,
Yeah, and it's just part one of what I found and what I'm finding. As you know, I'm working on volume 2 this year. That's my primary work as a writer. This year is following up with volume 2 right now as we speak. I would just, my biggest thing I like to emphasize is what I've said is I like to get people to take another look at the guy, to, just kind of set aside the propaganda that is really just designed to be a hit piece by, another group that were essentially jealous of the guy, scared to death that he was going to ruin their thing. But we talked about the Rosetta Stone, and we talked about the strong likelihood. I'm convinced that Napoleon absolutely did switch places with Joseph and spend most of the rest of his life here in the United States. And that's what the subsequent books are going into, a little bit more on that, the evidence on that, and what he did during those years. But there's also the night he spent in the pyramid. This is a kind of a piece of lore that has been out there.
Oh, yes. Do please go into that.
Yeah, mostly in like our community, okay? The community of New Age type history and things like that. And the only story we were told, the only source we had on it was, a close bodyguard had said once that Napoleon emerged from a night in the Great Pyramid, white as a sheet, and when asked what happened, he simply said, "You wouldn't believe it." And we're told that, that's it, like it's some type of, apocryphal tale, whatever, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're told that there's no source. In fact, my gosh, was it Sir Walter Scott or no, one of, I think, and definitely a couple of the modern historians who have come out and said that Napoleon never entered the Great Pyramid. Never. Went all those miles. He was fascinated with Egypt. He gets there, right? And we're told that he doesn't go inside. Well, that on the face of it is ridiculous. Okay. But there's also, I think what it is it's Walter Scott, or one of the other contemporary to Napoleon's life, stated very clearly in the specific date that he did tour around and go inside the Great Pyramid. So we have a source of Napoleon's time stating flat out that he did go inside the Great Pyramid, and that was just on the one occasion that they knew. So the idea that he never entered the pyramid, I've heard some people say it was beneath him to crawl on his hands and knees through the one entry, which you had to crawl on your hands and knees. This is a man who, except in the paintings that you saw him in, wore a plain uniform. He would have his officers and his subordinates wear the fanciest, frilliest uniforms, but he himself wore a plain hat and a plain uniform, except if he was getting, a painting done, or if there was something special event going on. And even then he would wear these plain clothes. So the idea that Napoleon Bonaparte thought he was too good to crawl on hands and knees to enter, a legendary site like that is just ridiculous. That's just more propaganda. And he wasn't like shorter than everybody. Napoleon Bonaparte was the average height for his era. I mean, so this idea that he had short man's attitude and stuff, in our times, yeah, he'd be, on the shorter side. Okay, because in our times, you got a lot of guys, our height and taller, running around. Back then, you didn't. So he was of, average height back then. He wasn't. So again, the idea that all these excuses they come up with for claiming why he would not have gone inside the pyramid are just ridiculous. So we know actually from the sources of his era that he did go inside the pyramid. So then you look at this claim, this story that he spent a night in the king's chamber and something weird happened. Well, I go into that in great detail in the book. And I put some... what am I looking for? It's speculative, it's hypothetical, but I put some what I think there's credence to it. I think that because of Monge, okay, it really rests on Monge. Okay, Monge is considered the father of modern geometry, or a segment of geometry. He's one of the famous, geometers, I guess they call him. And there's something called the Monge point, and it's where multi-planes come together. Okay, Now I prepare in my book, much better stated in the book than here, because this is on the fly, off the cuff, okay? But I go into the details as to why I think Monge believed that the so-called, subsequently known Monge point of the Great Pyramid is inside that sarcophagus in that king's chamber. That he believed the intersection of all the planes, the geometrical planes of the Great Pyramid intersected there. And because Monge was also a philosopher scientist type, I'm convinced that he would have believed that this would have included interdimensional planes, potentially. And Napoleon Bonaparte would have done anything that Monge suggested to him in the name of science, be it weird science or mundane. So what I propose hypothetically is that he prepared Napoleon to stay for several hours lying in the sarcophagus of the king's chamber just to see what would happen, and likely taught him certain forms of, meditation and whatever he needed to do to hypothetically, mind meld, lock his consciousness in on the Monge point of the Great Pyramid. And this might have explained whatever the experience was that really startled Napoleon, that made him emerge white as a sheet and telling the one person who asked, the first person who asked him, oh, you wouldn't believe me if I told you what I just saw, what I just witnessed. So I go into it in the book. It's I think for me, I think it's one of the best parts of the book. Certainly one of the most fascinating. And if you're up for speculative hypotheses on things like this, I think that's a part of the book that you really will enjoy. But there's other little tidbits that will suggest where it's going in the upcoming volumes.
And I have to tell you, I'm super enthusiastic for that. Do you have an ETA for when it'll be done?
Well, there's going to be, I'll announce it here, there's going to be multiple volumes of the Esoteric Napoleon, not just a volume 2, but volume 2. I'm aiming for late spring.
Now, it sounded like you trailed off about maybe a third or a fourth book.
Oh, there's going to be multiple. Yeah, there's going to be multiple volumes of this. Volume 2, as I said, I'm aiming for late spring, a release on volume 2. So I'm looking forward to that.
Can't wait to dig into that. That'll be a lot of fun. Next topic that I had to ask you about I'm forgetting at the moment. I guess I better go back and look at my notes. One moment. Un momento. So getting back to Hecate and the Tuida, are there other specific figures that you can think of that would qualify in the same sense that she did?
Qualify for what?
For being Tuida?
My research, my focus has been primarily on Hecate. So I really haven't ventured far enough into others to say with any personal conviction or authority yet. So,
and we were just discussing.
Let me amend that. I will say that what I suspect is that it's very possible that the legendary, they're identified as fallen angels, that came to came to Earth and taught humanity all these things they shouldn't know, which was interestingly things they needed to build a more advanced civilization. I'm looking into the possibility
that of Prometheus.
Yeah, and I'm looking into I'm going to be looking deeper and have been into the possibility that this biblical story of these fallen angels might be propaganda against just foes in a war. In other words, and that those fallen angels might have been also the Tuatha De Danann talked about in the Leibergellen Celtic lore. So that's a hint as to
Leibergellen sounds like a delicious whiskey.
Doesn't it? Yeah, it should be. If it should be. But go ahead with where you were going after that.
So this is the part where some of your research intersects with that of Dr. Joseph Farrell.
Yes.
This is, of course, the brand new edition. Love that new book smell from your Carvos label.
Yep.
The Giza Death Star. The Giza Death Star deployed.
Indeed, there it is.
And, of course, the Giza Death Star destroyed. And these are all wonderful books, must-read books.
Yes.
Can you tell us how, other than the way I started off the show, can you tell us how your work and Dr. Farrell's work intersects in that Venn diagram?
Well, basically, he's talking about how what he thinks they were designed to be and how he thinks they worked. And basically, where we intersect is I go into who might have used them, in our known history. So that's really, and here's the thing, where we do intersect. Nothing that I propose in Esoteric Napoleon can't work from Dr. Farrell's perspective on his Giza Death Star research. So in other words, they complement each other very nicely. That's pretty much what they do with each other.
Yeah, like I said, when I was watching you interviewing him on your show, a month ago or give or take?
About a month ago, and then a couple weeks ago now we did the really cool episode with the panel in session.
Oh yeah, I caught just the tail end of that. Yeah. I'll have to go back and rewatch that. What did Dr. Farrell have to say about your research and writing about Napoleon in the Great Pyramid of Giza?
Well, really, you can sum it up in what's on the cover of the book. And his quote was, "Intelligent analysis equaling historiographical megatonnage." Joseph P. Farrell.
Only Dr. Farrell would use a word like
right?
Historiographical.
Historiographical. Let me put it to you this way. He took me to the store when I visited him. A couple of mutual friend of ours and I visited Dr. Farrell where he lives in the Midwest, and he took us to his favorite local bookstore, which is one of these used book emporiums. You'd love it. And I found the book Bonaparte in Egypt. Okay, and I'd heard of this book, and there it was, a vintage copy of it. And he wondered, is there another one? Is there another one? I'm like, nope, I got the only one. And he and I had been talking about the secrets of Napoleon and related things for a few years by then. And so he was very encouraging that I go this direction, this Esoteric Napoleon direction. And yeah, he has. He's. I'm very grateful. He's had nothing but praise for it, actually. So I think he's as anxious to see the upcoming volumes as I am.
Yeah, absolutely. And for people who are unfamiliar with the Giza Death Star trilogy, what can you tell us about, I realize that we're here to plug your book, but as long as
this is totally this. If you're interested in the Esoteric Napoleon, I strongly recommend you read the Giza Death Star books, and vice versa. If you're interested in his, read Esoteric Napoleon. But basically, it's this really incredible trilogy. It's his first 3 books that he published in this field. He was a well-known theological scholar before he started writing what he says is called the weird stuff. And in those books, you find somewhat of an initial look at his comprehensive perspective that really overarches through all of his books up till now. So I would recommend them if you want to get a good take, the best starting place if you want to read Dr. Joseph Farrell's entire catalog. Start with the Giza Death Star trilogy and then read the Cosmic War after that. And of course, he's got, and I just ordered my copy a couple days ago. I'm anxious to read it. He got the Giza Death Star Revisited, the 4th volume, which is being published by his original publisher.
Of course,
is being shipped, now to folks who bought it. But if you want to read the original trilogy, you get them. Go to lostcontinentlibrary.com. or walterbosley.com, but lostcontinentlibrary.com, and because my nonfiction imprint, Corvos Books, is now the proud publisher of the Giza Death Star trilogy. Those editions you saw Cardinal Sin hold up, those are, my label's editions, and, they're there. You can find them linked at that site, lostcontinentlibrary.com.
Very cool, very cool. And since our giveaway tonight is a T-shirt of Kaleidoscope Grimoire, can you tell us anything about the movie and what's next for you as far as the way that you're building the film?
Well, obviously due to publishing business and the demands on my time this last fall for the TV development that's going on relative to Empire of the Wheel, I had finished shooting the scenes. I finished shooting the photography required with the actors, the live actors. And so I put it on hold to get through the business that was demanding my time, and then the holidays, and then the business at the beginning of the year. But I'm proud to say that I have set up the table upon which I will be commencing with the test footage for the stop motion animation part of the production to begin. And yourself, You yourself will be among the list of recipients who will see the footage, the test footage of that. That's exclusive only to those who are involved with the production. So look for that soon, because I will be starting that process, and I might be putting together a little studio in an outdoor structure, which will be heated and lit and have power in it and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that I'm looking at that becoming my kind of my permanent little animation studio. So once I get that established, then it's going to go like a lot faster, like wildfire. And I'm looking at getting all the animation portions done. You know what? I'm going to be careful with the predictions. I can easily get them done by the end of this calendar year, if not sooner. You and others are going to see the footage long before that. But as far as a release on the picture, realistically, to do it right, we're probably looking at late this year or into 2024.
Fantastic.
And I will release to the public. I will be releasing a couple of trailers as we go through the year.
Yeah. Everybody's looking forward to Kaleidoscope Room War.
Me too.
I don't mind speaking for everybody else when I say that. And there's the shirt. And
there it is.
Because of the microphone getting in the way, you can't really see the bottom of the design, but it is a really cool design. Yeah, that's just a fine looking shirt. And it's a fine wearing shirt as well.
Indeed.
And Jedi Bill has joined us. Greetings. And congratulations on your monetization. And we'll go ahead and put the URL for the giveaway here. The link is not in the chat, Radioactive, because the mod that we rely on to put the link in the chat is unavailable, but luckily I have the URL right here. So if you follow that URL, you'll be able to participate in our giveaway, which will be happening here in maybe 10 minutes or so. I wanted to plug your channel, and I think the best way to do that is just to let people know that on YouTube, it's called the Walter Bosley channel.
Yep.
My mods have put in the actual long form letter name into the chat, but it's easier just to search on the Walter Bosley channel.
Sure.
And can you give us a rundown on all the stuff that I missed, other than the last 3 or 4 minutes of your panel show?
The panel show is catching up with the Joseph Farrell episode as being the most popular one so far. It just really was something that we came up with the idea a week before we put it all together, and I'm very pleased with how it turned out, because it was a fascinating conversation. The panel, the members were all glad to be a part of it, and they had some great questions. And it just the question that inspired the discussion, and we are going to continue with that theme in future episodes with more different panel members. But basically, I wondered after that interview with Joseph Farrell the week before, less than a week before, it was a few days before I came up with the idea. are we in a trans-temporal cosmic war? You know, and I had asked him, the question came to mind during the interview. I can't believe I didn't ask him this before, but, you know, things hit you when they do. We were talking about the Giza Death Star concept, and, you know, I asked him, well, if you're talking about a possible side effect that could happen across time and space, in other words, you blast, you know, some energy from the Giza Death Star, you know, the Great Pyramid, as he proposes it, in ancient times, could the effect manifest in another time in another place? And he said, hypothetically, yes. So I took it further. I said, take, for instance, in 1908, Tunguska, the mysterious explosion there. Instead of it being caused by Tesla, could it have been caused by an ancient past blast of this Giza Death Star? And he said, yes, hypothetically. And that blew my mind. The question, you know, within a couple of days was, my gosh, are we in some conflict across space and time? And so I thought, oh, I gotta jump on that. So that was our kickoff to that discussion, and it's going to continue. I'm going to have more episodes with panels on that very question, because I think it's a question worth asking. It's a hypothetical, wild speculation worth exploring as much as anything gets discussed. So the best way to really describe it is just to go back and watch the thing, because it really touched a nerve, and we're going to be touching that nerve again and again.
Yeah, it seems like you've lined up interviews much in the same way that I do, where you'll be bringing people back once a month.
Or you know, as often as I can get them, you know, for what you know, what the discussion is. But remember, you're going to be on there soon, so that we can have, you know, a big, whether it's pop culture or whatever. You know, maybe we can do a movie viewing. Maybe we can have a big old long episode. You know, but I got to have you on there live.
Well, I'd be honored to be there.
So all we got to do is we'll hammer out when that'll happen. But folks, look for Cardinal Sin being over at the Walter Bosley channel soon. So I'll keep you posted on that.
And as you mentioned before, the place to get Walter's books is at lulu.com.
Well, all the links are at lostcontinentlibrary.com from now on. You just go to lostcontinentlibrary.com and it'll take you where you get the book.
Very good. And I was surprised, because I thought that I heard you say that they were only available at lulu.com.
Oh, they when you go to lostcontinentlibrary.com, I print and distribute through Lulu, yes. They're not, I don't distribute via Amazon, okay, not the printed books. Oh, but there, I said it. Yes, folks, audiobooks are being produced as we speak. And there's already a couple that are being finalized, and I will be releasing audiobooks as well. And some of those will be available on Audible, I think it is. That's through Amazon.
Which is owned by Amazon.
Yeah, but as far as the printed books go to lostcontinentlibrary.com and just know that they are printed and distributed via Lulu. Lulu's not a publisher. They are only a printing and distribution service.
And I was really surprised when I went to Amazon.com and I found that they are selling at least one of your books there.
Sure. Oh yeah. Some of the copies are out there, and I do have some on Kindle. I have Latitude 33 and Shimmering Light on Kindle.
But these were actual paperback books, like
used. They were probably used copies.
Nope, they were brand new. You may want to go to Amazon and have a look.
Okay. Well, now remember, people can buy a book and then turn around and sell it in their own storefront.
This looked like they were being distributed by Amazon.
Okay. I'll check that.
So, yeah, if nothing else. And I think this is the point by now when Antiderivative Jill would come up and tell us that we have 5 minutes left for you to get your name on the spinner wheel. Although if we don't have her for the spinner wheel, we may just go ahead and give it away on everybody in the chat that wants to be eligible to win a Kaleidoscope Grimoire t-shirt would pick a number, and the one that gets closest to without going over, we're playing the Price is Right rules, to Walter's number will win the t-shirt. But hopefully everything will work out and we'll have the spinner wheel, which is the highlight of the show for me every week, because I get to see my head spin around like I'm in The Exorcist, and it makes me nauseous. So as we wind up this episode, Walter, I just wanted to thank you again for being on and delving, kind of doing a deep drill down into the book and some of the other things that are going on. What's next for Walter Bosley, do you think?
Well, the TV development is moving along really well. I play that close to vest because I like to announce things when they happen.
Right.
But we're getting very close. A well-known network. My producer Melissa Tittle and I have been working with them, this particular network, directly in their development to bring a particular series based on my research actually to your screens. So that's a lot closer than I have let on. So I'm looking forward to that. That definitely should be moving forward this year. If it just means going into production on episodes and not airing till later in the year or not airing until next calendar year, that's going on. Also, I will be expanding the catalog at Lost Continent Library because, I just reached the 20-year anniversary mark last October. So this is really the time where you're going to start seeing Lost Continent Library really emerge and being more active with getting it out there. So who knows what will happen with that. I'm going to be releasing a print version of my legendary magazine that I did for a year and a half that really put me on the map back in 2008 and 2009. So hopefully I'll be traveling again also in the pursuit of these things. So really just kind of bringing some things into fruition and bringing some new projects, online as a result of that as well.
Are you going to be on a book tour anytime soon?
I will be putting together, I'm involved with a company that's putting together literary tours, special themed literary tours, and that is in the planning stages of the individual tours. And probably the first among those will be the longer version of the Empire of the Wheel tour, like you took yourself, and some other literary themed tours around Southern California initially, but it's going to expand beyond that by next year probably. So yeah, that's going on.
I can say without any fear of being in doubt that there are a couple of bookstores that would love to have you here in Lawrence for a book signing.
I love to do signings, so tell them about me and let me know what I need to do to make that happen.
Absolutely. Will do. All right. With that, I think what we're going to do is I'm going to, Walter, have you pick a number between 1 and 30. Keep it to yourself.
Okay.
And everybody that wants to be eligible to win the Kaleidoscope Grimoire t-shirt, go ahead and just put your number in the chat. Select the number between 1 to 30 and put it in the chat, and it'll appear next to your name. And that way we can get around the whole spinner wheel issue for tonight. This is our plan B. So radioactive is number 15, right there in the middle.
I have written the number down on this torn envelope.
Okay. Camp's Crash Courses is number 8. And this is a freebie, folks. Not only the shirt, but the postage and handling is free. So make sure and get your number in there. Yep. Nicholas Horton has selected the number 24. Cosmic Squirrel is number 14. Tessa is number 0. I said between 1 and 30. And Ms. Jonacide is number 13. Ari selects Pi, which is completely irrational. He feels like it would be nepotism if anyone saw him win a prize, which I think is silly because he's here more than most and he deserves a chance to win as much as anybody else does. But no, Canadian Spider-Man 69 is not between 1 and 30. So as we're wrapping up here, go ahead and get your number in, and we will make sure that everybody has a chance to win. And that's why we have the giveaway at the end of the episode, so that everybody, will hang around and watch the stream, and then be able to be eligible to win at the end of the episode. And I have to say, Walter, the Kaleidoscope Grimoire shirts are really cool. I don't wear mine very often because I want to keep it in really good shape. But it's comfortable. It looks like it has a bunch of plastisol all over it, but actually it's almost transparent in areas, so it's actually really
and we're going to be having a lot more apparel with the Kaleidoscope Grimoire graphics, a better quality, a variety of different products. One of the other products we got is, here's my phone case, a Kaleidoscope Grimoire phone case.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. And I'm real excited about that film project. So I'm anxious to get back into production on it because the animation part's going to be the best stuff.
And let's see who else we have here. Tolfer is at number 28. And so I'm going to say last call to put your number next to your name to win a t-shirt. And Walter, these will be in the sex and size of the winner. Is that right?
Well, we pretty much they're unisex shirts, and I have the sizes of the shirts I have on hand. So what we'll do is we'll do the closest approximation to the size of the winner.
Cool. And do you have any Kaleidoscope Grimoire stickers and tchotchkes or anything yet?
Not yet, but those things are coming.
And Canadian Spider-Man says, I love the shirts that I got from Cardinal Sin's merch store. Good images and great quality. And that's at gillstore.org. Well, thanks, Canadian Spider-Man. I happen to agree. As a matter of fact, in the waning moments here, I can give you a little video made by our good friend Fet for Hire that shows you some of the merch that is available.
Take it slow, one step at a time. I need to know the reason and the
So that's our little sizzle reel for stuff that's available at gillstore.org. And there's even more than that available. We've got new designs, critical hit gaming with Cardinal Sin, which I have a backlog of episodes that I need to get up. And it's going to be even a more dope store, as the kids used to say, than it is now. And it looks like Darth Scipio with 29 is our last guesser. So, Walter, who went the closest without going over?
Well, the number was 17.
Okay. Did we have a 17?
Look at that. I did that in a green ink, and so the stars are showing through the envelope. This is my magic envelope, people.
Closest without going over. So let's go ahead and double check here.
You had someone who did 14, and you had radioactive at 15. And then someone in the 20s, I believe, 26 or something like that. 29, maybe.
Yeah. So I guess radioactive is our big winner.
Oh, but without going over. That's right. Right. Radioactive. Yay.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Yes. Okay.
So go ahead and give me send me an email at gill@sunflower.com. And it's easy to remember. My first name is Gil. I live in Kansas. And the sunflower
and the
is
size.
the state sunflower of Kansas.
Don't forget the size.
Yes, please include the size in that email as well. So congratulations, Radioactive. Lots of congratulatory comments in the chat. And I have to say, Walter, this 2 hours has just blown by.
I know. We'll do more in the future, longer times. I'll be around for more time, and then when I have you on, we gotta, do some fun stuff. We gotta, talk about some movies and pop culture and all
I'm
that.
your man. Looking forward to it. Anything else you wanted to plug or anything before we wrap up?
No, I think I've done all the shameless self-promotion already. Just thanks for having me on again. I
sure.
always enjoy being here, and I'm looking forward to having you on my show, really, because now that I'm having guests and stuff, people are really liking it, and you got to be in there. You got to come over to my house, so to speak, and
sure.
We'll do the tikis and the pours, and maybe what we can do is a movie viewing. We can put on the same DVD or find something streaming, and we can do our own little.
Sometimes do on my channel is watch a movie from my hard drive, which has been ripped from a Blu-ray.
Sounds
on
good.
Cosme, and that way everybody can watch the same movie at the same time.
Oh, I like that. And
then we can go online on YouTube and discuss it afterward.
There you go. I'm in. Let's make that happen.
Sounds like a plan, my friend. Well,
cool.
Again, thanks for being on, talking about the Esoteric Napoleon. And I believe at least one person said, I'm going to go grab a copy. I think it was Cam's Crash Courses. Yeah, he says, I'm going to be picking up the Esoteric Napoleon.
Ah, thank you.
So that'll be at lulu.com.
Yeah, Lulu, you can go directly to Lulu, or you can go to lostcontinentlibrary.com. I'd appreciate it if you go there. You'll get a brand spanking new copy.
Yeah. And it's a very handsome book. I mean,
thank you.
Everything that you put out is very handsome.
They keep
and
getting better.
I really like the cover art that you did for Seshuri's re-releases.
Oh, you mean Joseph Farrell's or?
No, like Metamorphosis, the cover of
Oh,
Metamorphosis.
well, the new covers. The only difference is the Wonder of the Worlds. The title font is bolder, and of course, I added the Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 little bits on there. But right now, we're in the process of the first hardcover release from my company is going to be the upcoming hardcover special edition of Wonder of the Worlds. So I'll be talking a lot about that when we're ready to release that. Where it's in the phase where we're finalizing everything, and look for that soon.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I do want to thank our guest, Walter Bosley, again for being here. And it's Cardinal Sin.